All right, get ready for a deep dive into a book that sparked, well, some pretty strong reactions, to say the least. We're talking about The Way of the Superior Man by David Deida.
A book that dives headfirst into these timeless questions about men and women, relationships, even a touch of spirituality, all through Deida's pretty distinct lens, you could say.
And it's definitely gotten people talking. I mean, it's sitting there as a #1 bestseller on Amazon.
Oh, yeah, in the psychology and counseling books on sexuality category, no less. But when you dig into the reviews, you'll see some seriously mixed feelings on this one.
That's for sure. You've got folks calling it life-changing, and then others who are like, whoa, this is getting a little strange for me.
Definitely makes you wonder what you're in for, right?
No doubt. So should we warn the listeners? Buckle up. It's going to be a wild ride through Deida's world.
Well, let's just say it's a deep dive that'll get you thinking, that's for sure.
No. One of the things that makes Deida's work so fascinating is how he tackles this whole evolving landscape of relationships. Like, he'd probably argue that we've thankfully moved beyond those rigid, almost stereotypical roles of like the macho man and the submissive housewife.
Yeah, I mean, thank goodness for that progress.
Yeah.
But where does that leave us now, according to Deida?
Well, he suggests that in our rush to ditch those old roles, we've sort of swung the pendulum to the opposite extreme.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
So now we're dealing with this pressure for like forced neutrality in relationships where those unique masculine and feminine energies end up getting stifled, which in Deida's view leads to less fulfilling relationships overall. Okay, so let's talk about this whole energy thing, because it seems like that's at the heart of Deida's whole philosophy, wouldn't you say?
You got it. Deida believes that beyond our physical bodies, we each have this sexual essence. And this essence, he says, can be more masculine or feminine.
And it's not about your biological sex, right? Like, it's not as simple as men are masculine and women are feminine.
Exactly. He's saying it's about the energy you naturally gravitate toward, regardless of your gender.
So it's not about going back to those old school gender roles, but more about understanding and owning your energy and how that energy interacts with your partners.
You're picking it up quickly. That's it in a nutshell. Deida encourages us to consciously embody our true nature within a relationship. And for men, he calls this living as the superior man.
Okay, before we go any further, I got to say that phrase superior man, it feels a little, I don't know, loaded in today's world, right?
Totally. It's definitely a phrase that can make people a little uneasy. But for Deida, superior, it's not about dominance in that, traditional kind of power over others sense.
Yeah, because that's not what this is about, right? It's not about men being better than women.
Right. He's using superior to describe a man who's deeply self-aware, who lives with purpose, and who is like fully in tune with his own unique masculine energy. And a big part of that for Deida is letting go of those expectations that might not actually be serving us.
And that's where that chapter title comes in, right? Live as if your father were dead. I'll admit, that one definitely grabbed my attention.
It's a head turner for sure.
But what's he really getting at there?
Well, what Deida's saying is that even if you had a great relationship with your dad, you might unconsciously taken on his expectations of what it means to, be a man. And those might not line up with who you truly are.
So it's like giving yourself permission to reevaluate those inherited beliefs and maybe define masculinity for yourself on your own terms.
You nailed it. And for Deida, the superior man, he knows his, and this is another one of his phrases, his real edge.
Real edge, okay.
Which means he's honest about his capabilities, but he doesn't feel the need to, inflate them or pretend to be something he's not. Mm-hmm. That authenticity for Deida, that's where real strength comes from.
I can see that, because how many times have we, as men especially, felt this pressure to be the strong, silent type, right? Like, that's what we've been taught masculinity should look like. But what if real strength is about being willing to show vulnerability?
Deida would be right there with you on that one. He actually argues that vulnerability, it's essential for real connection, really letting people in. And this actually ties into another one of his core ideas, which is that a man's purpose in life, it needs to come before his romantic relationship.
It's not that the relationship isn't important, but without that strong sense of purpose, it's like a man might end up looking for it through his partner, which can create a lot of unhealthy dynamics, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Imagine it like building a house. You need a solid foundation first, right? Okay. Before you can even think about building a strong, stable home with someone else.
So that sense of purpose, for Deida, that's the foundation for a truly fulfilling relationship.
That's exactly it. And that leads us to his concept of, and get ready for this one, decoding her. Deida has some, shall we say, interesting views on understanding women through this lens of masculine and feminine energy.
Decoding her. It's like we need a secret decoder ring to figure out relationships, right?
Kind of. See, Deida believes that men and women, well, we tend to speak different languages, especially when it comes to, relationships and all that jazz. And he suggests that those things women complain about, those little frustrations, they might not actually be about the thing itself, if that makes sense.
So it's like that whole you never take out the trash thing. There's a hidden meaning there.
Bingo. He uses this example in the book where a woman is annoyed because her husband, well, he hasn't cleaned out the garage. On the surface, it's just a messy garage, right? But Deida would say, no, there's something deeper going on. She's actually expressing this need, this deep-seated need for her partner to step into that masculine energy of direction, follow through.
So it's not about the garage at all.
Not really, no. That unfinished chore, it becomes like this symbol, right? For a larger pattern. And for her, it can really impact her sense of security, her sense of trust in the relationship.
Which is so different from how us guys tend to approach things. Like, our instinct is to just fix the problem, right? Okay, I'll clean the garage, no problem. But we might be completely missing what's really going on underneath.
Exactly. Deida's saying that men, we're wired to problem solve, plain and simple.
Right.
Whereas women, they're often expressing those emotional needs through these seemingly mundane complaints. And if we don't learn to bridge that gap in communication, it can lead to a lot of frustration on both sides.
Almost like she's giving us a clue, but it's wrapped up in this riddle that we need to solve.
That's a great way to put it. And it gets even more interesting. You ready for this? Deida actually believes that a woman doesn't actually want to be the number one priority in a man's life.
Okay, now that one's definitely a head scratcher.
Right. It goes against everything we think we know, right?
Yeah.
But his argument is that what a woman truly desires, deep down, is a man who's deeply connected to his purpose, a man who's living his truth, showing up with that strength and direction in his life. That, for Deida, is what creates that sense of security, that foundation of trust that allows her to really relax into her own feminine energy.
I can see that, actually. I mean, don't we all, men and women, want to feel like our partners are, living authentically, like they're pursuing what really lights them up?
Absolutely. And Deida takes it a step further. He suggests that instead of focusing on what our partners are doing wrong, we should actively praise the qualities we want to see more of, really shine a light on the positive and encourage that growth rather than dwelling on the flaws or the shortcomings.
So instead of nitpicking, it's about actively reinforcing those positive aspects. That's a pretty different way to approach communication, in relationships especially.
It is. And all this really ties back to Deida's concept of polarity. This idea that men and women, we experience the world, we experience relationships in these fundamentally different ways. For him, attraction, it's not just skin deep. It goes way beyond physical appearance. It's about this deeper energetic connection.
Right. And we talked about sexual essence earlier. Now you're bringing energy into it too. So tell me more about this polarity thing. How does that all work, according to Deida?
Well, Deida describes women as having these different energetic temperatures, right? Like some are hot, fiery, passionate. Others are cool, soothing, nurturing. And a man's attraction to these energies, well, it can shift over time, often depending on what's happening in his life, what he needs on a deeper level.
This is where that whole babysitter example comes in, right? The one everyone always talks about. I have to admit, I'm a little curious about this one.
Yeah, that's definitely one of Deida's more, shall we say, provocative examples.
You put it mildly.
Without getting into too much detail, he uses this example to illustrate how a man, even a man who's in a committed relationship, he might find himself drawn to the vibrancy, the youthful energy of, a younger woman. Like a babysitter in this case.
Okay, before we go any further, I think it's important to be super clear here. Deida is not condoning cheating, right?
Absolutely not. It's not about saying infidelity is okay. It's about raising awareness, right? It's about getting honest about those natural fluctuations in attraction that we all experience, and then, making conscious choices that align with our values.
So it's less about judging those attractions and more about understanding them and not acting on every impulse we have.
Exactly. Deida wants us to be conscious about these things, to make deliberate choices in our relationships.
So recognizing these shifts in energy, that can actually help us make more conscious decisions in our relationships rather than just reacting on autopilot.
You got it. It's about understanding ourselves, understanding our partners on a much deeper level. And Deida, he doesn't shy away from the more intense, the more shadowy aspects of desire either. In fact, there's a whole chapter called She Wants the Killer in You. which I'll admit always gets people talking.
Okay, yeah. That title alone just screams controversy. So what's Deida really getting at with that one?
Well, he's playing with language a bit, definitely being provocative on purpose. But when Deida talks about the killer, he's not talking about literal violence, right? Mm-hmm. He's talking about a woman's desire for a man who embodies courage, a man who's willing to face challenges head on and isn't afraid to confront those darker, scarier parts of himself.
Interesting. So it's about those symbolic deaths we experience when we, let go of old habits, limiting beliefs, those fears that are holding us back.
Exactly. It's about that inner strength, that willingness to step into the unknown, even when it's uncomfortable. And Deida connects this to a bigger trend, he says, in modern society, where we tend to suppress those darker sides of ourselves, both men and women. And maybe, just maybe, that's part of what's leading to so much dissatisfaction in relationships.
Like, we're so busy trying to be nice and presentable that we lose touch with those raw, primal parts of ourselves that make us feel truly alive.
That's a great way to put it. And you know what? This all ties into another one of Deida's more, let's say, interesting perspectives, his views on sex and intimacy.
Oh boy, here we go.
Get ready for a wild ride.
Okay, so we've talked about energy, purpose, facing those shadows, even our inner killers. But sex, well, that feels like a whole other level. So where does intimacy fit into all of this, according to Deida?
Well, let's just say Deida's views on sex, they tend to ruffle some feathers. He's definitely not advocating for, a quick, purely physical experience. He sees sex as this path to something much deeper, a way to cultivate real conscious intimacy.
I've heard that Deida's ideas on sex can be, well, a little out there, maybe even controversial for some people. What are some of the things he emphasizes?
One of the biggest ones, and this is where people tend to, raise an eyebrow, is his view on ejaculation. Believe it or not, he sees frequent ejaculation as energetically depleting for men. Like it can actually hinder a man's ability to really stay present, really connected during intimacy.
So it's not about like demonizing pleasure or anything like that. It's more about being intentional, being conscious about ejaculation instead of just seeing it as the default goal.
You got it. Deida suggests that men can actually experience a much more intense and more fulfilling experience when they learn to prolong intimacy without ejaculating every time. It's about shifting the focus away from that end goal of release and really exploring that prolonged connection, that energetic exchange.
And how does this tie back into that idea of masculine and feminine energy in relationships?
For Deida, when a man can really stay present, energetically grounded during sex, it creates this deep sense of security, of trust for his partner. It's like it flips the script on that dynamic where a woman might feel like she's, draining her partner or something.
So it's less about withholding and more about cultivating that deeper level of presence, of stamina, both physically and energetically.
Exactly. And Deida, he actually provides specific practices in the book, like breathing exercises, visualizations, things like that he says can help men cultivate that stamina, that presence. He really sees intimacy as this practice, this way to deepen connection and tap into the full potential of that sexual energy.
Wow, we've covered some serious ground in this deep dive, the way of the superior man. Definitely a lot to unpack. So for our listeners who are, maybe feeling a little overwhelmed, what would you say is the key takeaway here?
I'd say if you're willing to really sit with his ideas, even the ones that might make you, shift in your seat a little bit, Deida's work can be incredibly powerful. He's really inviting us, especially men, to show up in a more conscious way, a more embodied way in our relationships and just in the world.
It's about being present, right? Like really present in every area of our lives, not just going through the motions.
Exactly. And I think one of the most powerful messages in the whole book is this idea that, in a way, our intimate relationships, they're like this microcosm of how we relate to the world around us. They reflect our deepest desires, our fears, our capacity for love, for growth, for connection, all of it.
So if our relationships are a mirror, it makes you wonder, what are they reflecting back to us? That's something I'll definitely be pondering for a while.
It's a question worth asking.
It really is. And on that note, we'll leave you with that thought. If you're intrigued by Deida's work, feeling inspired to explore these ideas further, well, we encourage you to check out The Way of the Superior Man and see what resonates with you. It's been an incredible deep dive, and we hope you found it, well, insightful, thought-provoking, maybe even a little challenging at times. Till next time.